Brian McKenna here at 360, the infrastructure event, and I'm talking to Mateen Greenway from HP. What are the security implications of virtualization?
I think virtualization changes the model as far as security is concerned. It's part of an ongoing trend whereby all of the certainties, all of the walls that we put in place in security are basically being broken down. We developed a model that was very simple. We had one application to one server kind of model. Within that, we essentially created a fortress of security. We had our data hidden underneath our application. You had to log into the application. In the old days, you even had to go to a particular physical location. All of those certainties have been broken down. You don't have to go to a particular location. You can now access data from anywhere in the world. You can access the applications remotely through mobile devices, all of those kind of characteristics. In addition, we're now looking at moving the data away from the application so that there is actually direct access to data. That again changes the model because the data is now not being filtered through a particular application. The applications themselves can now be lodged on virtualized hardware, so the data and the applications can be anywhere in the world.
To what extent should security concerns be a factor in determining what choice you make in terms of moving from virtualization to cloud computing?
Again, I think that's a very important issue. Companies have been going through essentially a continuum of change. They've moved from the old distributed worlds, they've gone through consolidation, physical consolidation, logical consolidation. They've moved into virtualization. Cloud extends that model even further because cloud introduces a couple of additional things. Firstly, it increases the amount of location independence that there is, and secondly, it basically opens up a new compute model that is based upon scale out rather than scale up. Now, in terms of security, there's quite a gulf at the moment between the traditional sort of outsource models and even the virtualized models and the cloud. What you're finding is the sort of outsource models, which are moving towards a utility delivery kind of model, are very good on security, very high SLA, but very expensive because of all of that work. Cloud is coming from the opposite world. It's coming from a very thin hardware model. It's coming from a cheap approach, good enough approach. So it tends to be very light on SLAs and very light on security. Over time, what we need is to bring those things together so that you actually can choose a range of solutions depending upon your security needs, depending upon your location needs. An additional dimension of that is the debate about private versus public cloud. A lot of companies are looking at private cloud as a way of taking some of the advantages of the cloud model, but putting it in a more controlled security, a more controlled SLA kind of context, and sort of mixing, matching the various kind of solutions. So we tend to look at it not as a cloud will be the silver bullet that will replace everything. Cloud adds this new model. And it sort of puts more responsibility now on people to actually figure out what the best way of deploying particular applications is. You can choose now from a palette of outsourced, utility, cloud kind of models, all of which come with different SLAs, different security, that actually allows you to construct your solutions in the most efficient way, which is one of those classic things that sounds really easy if you say it very fast, because you now need security models that actually encompass all of that equipment, that actually can deal with situations like, whilst I want to make use of cloud processing, I don't want my data to be moved offshore, or I want my data for certain things to be controlled within the organisations. So you've got a world where data is now very mobile. How do you control data in this deperimeterised world? And I think in many ways we need to build new security models to actually take account of that mobility of data.
Do you think cloud computing is taking off less quickly than many of the suppliers would have hoped?
I'd have to say yes and no to that. I'd almost distinguish between the bucket term that people are using, cloud computing, for almost everything, including most of the outsourcing and utility models, including a lot of what was being delivered before, and what I would see as this global scale approach to delivering shared infrastructures, which I would categorise as more sort of purist cloud. I think in the purist cloud, small and start-up companies find it very easy to make use of those kind of capabilities. What we've found is within large organisations, there are worries about the security. And in fact, they're exacerbated by the fact that a lot of staff are using the cloud as a kind of shadow IT to get around corporate walls, to actually do things that IT won't allow me to do. Within the actual sort of adoption sort of phase within the company itself, I think people are very much more in testing mode. What we found is it's quite easy to sell things like test and development environments in a cloud kind of model. For some organisations, even there, they prefer a private cloud kind of model. But to move that into a cloud is relatively easy. Production stuff, people are not quite so sure. They haven't seen it working. They're not comfortable about the SLAs. So a lot of them are saying, well, why can't I take my outsource model, move that forward into this utility kind of approach and use that as a stepping stone to actual cloud?
Do you think that the security concerns that corporates often have around cloud computing, that those concerns are in a sense misplaced, or at least a solvable problem?
I think they're a solvable problem. The problem I always have when people talk about these kind of security sort of problems is people don't apply a terribly rational approach. They tend to either have 100% security or none. You know, disaster recovery is a classic situation. Everybody complains disaster recovery is very expensive, because rather than sort of looking and saying, what security do I actually need, they actually say, I've either got to have everything or I have nothing. And I think the same applies in the cloud. And in a sense, you need a sort of two-dimensional analysis. You need to look at what is the exposure risk of loss of data, and then what is the impact of that loss on the organisation, and come up to a realistic calculation. So there's a lot of data, a lot of web site data, a lot of stuff that's already moved outside the corporate firewall that would fit very well into a cloud kind of environment. I think the main thing is that we're moving into this world of a new security model, of a deperimeterized security model. The old certainty of data being hidden under an application no longer exists. If I'm moving to data as a service, publishing a data set into an environment where people have analysis tools, search tools to be able to go and get that data, how do I manage the security of that kind of environment? How do I avoid just having to bring it all back into the corporation and put a big wall around it to stop people accessing it?
Mateen Greenway from HP, thank you very much.
Thank you.